We are still learning the full extent of the efforts by Trump's allies to subvert democracy and hand the former president an illegitimate victory. There's new reporting today that Trump lawyer John Eastman was advising state lawmakers on how to disenfranchise their own voters, long before he was urging former Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election. Emails obtained by Politico show that Eastman hatched a plan to recount Pennsylvania's votes after throwing out tens of thousands of absentee ballots. In an email about a month after the election, Eastman wrote to Pennsylvania legislator Russ Diamond, quote, having done that math, you'd be left with a significant Trump lead that would bolster the argument for the legislature adopting a slate of Trump electors. Perfectly within your authority to do anyway, but now bolstered by the untainted popular vote. That would help provide some cover. The emails are part of a cache sent to the January 6th Select Committee by a Colorado group. Eastman had used a University of Colorado email account while he was a visiting professor there. The new revelations come as Republicans continue to try to whitewash the siege as a peaceful protest. In his new book, former Attorney General Eric Holder writes that while many have tried to erase the danger of January 6th, the real story of that day isn't how our country came together to make sure this coup attempt failed. It's how close it came to succeeding and how quickly in states across the country, Republicans began working to make sure that the next time it could. I'm joined now by former Attorney General Eric Holder, chair of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee and author of Our Unfinished March, The Violent Past and Imperiled Future of the Vote, A History, a Crisis, a Plan. A very timely book as well. Attorney General Holder, thank you for being here. And this is what scares me is, well, two things. One, how close they came to actually succeeding in this coup and how detailed the coup planning was, but also the fact that they've started working on fixing the things that went wrong so they could get it right the next time, especially by replacing all up and down the ballot regular Republicans, formerly regular Republicans, with people who believe the big lie and who are willing to implement it. How worried should we be that we won't have any more free and fair elections in this country going forward?
I think we need to be extremely concerned about that. The reality is that they came pretty close in 2020. And as you say, with the replacement of these regular Republicans, like the guy Vanderbilt in Michigan, potentially what they're trying to do with Georgia, state officials as well. If you have a close election, as we talk about in the book, if you have a close election the next time, you may have Republicans who are willing to do the kinds of things that disgrace Eastman was trying to pull off. We stood between the first time we did not have a peaceful transfer of power and the way we normally do things. It was a very, very narrow margin that kept us a functioning democracy.
Let me read something that you wrote in your book. You talked about the fact that, going all the way back, and you write a lot about, and I'm obviously very passionate about the idea of the vote, and the Shelby ruling that you said made you realize that the Supreme Court was not going to protect us here. You said, how could 5 unelected judges with lifetime appointments gut a law that had been so recently reauthorized by Congress in a historic bipartisan landslide, had been supported by every president since Lyndon Johnson, and had for nearly 50 years secured the right to vote for millions of Americans? There were plenty of past Supreme Court rulings that I did not agree with, but at least with those, I believe the justices had come by their opinions honestly, that they had written them on the basis of their understanding of the Constitution. With Shelby, I had a hard time convincing myself that that was true. You also noted that without a legitimate basis, they'd undermine our most fundamental right. And as a silent protest, you decided you would not appear before the court as Attorney General. Now that we've seen what they're willing to do to women's rights with Roe, I would think that has deepened your cynicism about them. And so if a case were to come to this court that we now have with this 5-person ideological majority, do you believe that they would affirm the theft of the election?
That's a real concern. That is a real concern. What will they do? I'm not saying that they're necessarily partisan, but they are certainly overly ideological. And they have turned their back on precedent in reaching this apparent decision about Roe versus Wade. They have attacked a fundamental right here. That is the right to privacy. And there's a whole range of things that are based on the right to privacy, same-sex marriage, a whole range of other things. And if they're willing to do that with regard to abortion, Why should we assume that they are going to stop there? When it comes to things political, what we have seen them do with regard to the 1965 Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County case, in Rucho, when they decided not to get involved when it came to partisan gerrymandering, Citizens United. I mean, this is a court that is, at least with regard to 5 of its members, are pretty radical, and not at all feeling that they have to be bound by the notion of precedence, which is the glue that gives the Supreme Court legitimacy.
So then when you have, good news like we had today in Florida, where, Ron DeSantis's really racist map was thrown out because he essentially stripped Black Floridians in the central part of the state, the same place where he's attacking Disney, of their representatives to replace them with Republicans. This extreme gerrymandered map, despite the fact that Florida has a fair district amendment in their constitution that was voted on by the people. So they won, the people won in Florida. But whenever I see a victory like that, I just fear that the Republicans will appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court. And then this court will say, nah, you can have the racist map.
Well, yeah, I mean, we won a case in Alabama with 2 Trump judges who said, Black people in Alabama do not have adequate representation when it comes to the congressional delegation. You need to redraw the maps in such a way that they do have an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. We won that. They took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made the determination that it was too close in time to the election, and therefore Alabamans will vote this year on a slate of candidates that a court down there, including 2 Trump judges, said was inappropriate, was unconstitutional. In Wisconsin, we had the Wisconsin Supreme Court pick a map that was designed by the Wisconsin Democratic governor. The Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, threw that out. And so they have shown themselves to be not only radical, but also activists, the thing that we have always heard from conservatives and from Republicans. They rail against activist judges unless they do things in the way that they want them to be done.
Yeah, and I would still argue they're partisan as well, but I will leave that, us disagree on that. So what do we do about this? Your book talks about, trying to solve it, a plan. The last line of your book is a plan. What's the plan?
Well, the plan is we talk about a number of structural reforms, limiting the number of years that somebody can serve on the Supreme Court to 18, the way in which Supreme Court justices are picked, have every president pick a Supreme Court justice in his or her first and third year of a term, banning partisan gerrymandering, but also empowering people to get involved. I mean, talking about voting, we talk about a young woman named Love Caesar, who was at North Carolina A&T and who was concerned about the fact that North Carolina A&T was divided. I mean, literally divided in half. One part of the campus, half the campus was in one congressional district, half of the campus was in another congressional district, also that you would weaken the power of that huge Black population that resided on North Carolina A&T. She drew a line right down the street where that line actually went in chalk. I went down there, saw it. Through her activism, through the lawsuit that we brought, that was changed. And that's just one of the examples. And we have the book filled with examples of so-called ordinary people deciding to be involved, committed, sacrificing, and making big structural changes. And we still have that capacity within us. This is, at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty optimistic book. It raises the dangers and talks about the dangers we face now in a realistic way, but provides a pathway so that we can get back to the America that, although flawed, is consistent with our founding ideals.
No, I like optimism. I don't have a lot of it, so I'll take it. Our unfinished march, the violent past, and imperiled future of the vote, a history, a crisis, a plan. I like that, a plan part. Former U.S. Attorney Eric Holder, thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate you being here. And up next.
Thanks, Joy.
Cheers.